Welcome to Learn at Work podcast, which is sponsored by iOS Press, the publisher of Work, a journal of prevention, assessment, and rehabilitation. We're delighted to host this podcast that will bring together insightful conversations and thought-provoking discussions on topics that matter most in the realm of health, rehabilitation, work, prevention, and assessment. What can you expect from our podcast? We'll have expert interviews, individuals who have published in the journal, and we'll dive into conversations with leaders who have shared their valuable experience and expertise. You'll learn about different latest work trends, technology, and best practices. I'm Kathryn Jacobs, the founding editor of Work, and I'm the moderator of these podcasts. Welcome to the Learn at Work webinar, which is hosted by the journal Work, a journal of prevention, assessment, and rehabilitation. I'm Kathryn Jacobs, the founding editor of Work, and I'm delighted to have on this episode of Learn at Work one of our editorial board members, Kathryn. And Kathryn, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and maybe just talk about joining the board as an editorial board member of Work, but then about your career that ties so much into work. So welcome.
Great, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's such a pleasure to be part of the Journal of Work, and it's just been really amazing to see how my work has really started to shift the last couple of years to really focus in on what does our future of work look like, and more specifically in the space of healthcare and leadership and all the exciting changes that are coming down the line, but also how are we preparing everyone to deal with this level of uncertainty?
So Kathryn, maybe our listeners would be interested to know a little bit more background about yourself and your career and how you ended up being really so knowledgeable about the future of work, or as much as we can predict the future of work.
Great. Well, I started my career as a pediatric occupational therapist, and I really thought that was going to be my career for life. I loved it. And then, like everyone who moves into more leadership or program development, really loves the ideas of innovation and how we were changing things and mentoring and leading teams. And so naturally moved into leadership positions, went on to do master's in healthcare administration because I was really interested in the broader healthcare system. And then just looked at focusing and supporting teams in both home care and hospital care space. Then I went on to do my OTD degree at Boston University, and my focus there was the use of telehealth to support older adults in the community, and then transitioned back into a teaching role, helping to build out occupational therapy curriculum, but then had the amazing opportunity to join the University of California, San Francisco, where now I'm the program director and associate professor in our Masters of Science in Health Admin and Interprofessional Leadership, also lead faculty in our UCSF Leadership Institute. And through that work, and also just with working with leaders from across the health system, across the US and Canada, I've really started to take a step back and look at, what are the needs of people in this space, right? We know that there's a lot of innovation coming down the pipes with either AI or digital healthcare. But what is the impact on how we work, and how are we preparing people for this level of change? So in the last year or so, I've really immersed myself in a lot of literature, doing some small R research and looking at what are people's needs in this space, and really is trying to change the lens to what will the next 5 to 10 years bring. And I think a lot of this is a result of just looking at a workforce that has come off of the pandemic and really challenged with burnout, people leaving healthcare altogether, and having a new wave of learners and new clinicians come into the space. And now we're adding in a whole other level of change. And so a lot of my passion and interest is to get people excited about these changes, but also make sure that we're training people with the right skills so that people are not left behind, that they can work with these tools and really lean into our humanness in all of this, right? We know technology won't be able to replace. And I think we're just really at the beginning of this conversation. So it's very exciting, but all very daunting too.
Yes, I loved how you said daunting. And there's so much uncertainty in the future. If we read the headlines every day, everything is changing so quickly. So how do we prepare for the future of work? Any sort of suggestions that our listeners may be able to sort of reflect on themselves?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a few areas that I've really started to speak about. And one is just letting people know of the environment that we're in, that we are in a VUCA environment, and that is stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And it comes off of a military term, and then the leadership development and business space has taken over this term as well to really help its leaders and its workforce understand what we're dealing with, right? I think that we need to name it and know that this is a very challenging time. We don't know when, this technology changes will end or if they ever will. So we actually have to figure out who we are as workers and as humans in this space and get clarity over like what is the problem we're trying to solve or what is this uncertainty that we're feeling. I think the other piece to all of this is actually taking it back to a lot of our OT roots. OTs are wonderful at task analysis, and I think that this is where we can really lean into thinking about what the future looks like. So, for example, I think what we hear a lot of in terms of the acceptance of AI or technology is it's going to take over a job, right? And it's very dichotomous. It's very much like it's going to take over or we're not going to use it at all. And I think we have to be okay with experimentation and being creative, but also start to look at, okay, in my role and in a task I do in my role, what could AI automate? What could be augmented? And then finally, what is the human part that I can still contribute to? And I have found that the way that we can change, that's a great way to change our conversation. To say to people, let's calm down and let's really think about not this all or nothing, but what are ways that we can work with it and really be brave to say, when is it not something we want to work with? So I do think that really allowing people the space to think about what their roles are, what their work is, and not just look at it as technology will take over my whole job, but what aspects of my job could potentially be supported by this or not supported by it. And also, we know some roles may be eliminated, but what we don't know is there's going to be many more created. And let's really lean into what's going to be left, right? Or what could be created and try to find some comfort in that. But we also have to make sure that we are creating cultures in our workplaces that are about constant learning, right? We used to learn, the old style of learning was you go to grad school or you go to school, you learn your job, you graduate. And that's not the reality anymore. We're going to see more certificates, more skills-based programs, and constantly reskilling or learning new techniques because everything's changing. And we have to use that language with our workforce, and we have to use that language with the next generation of workers.
I absolutely agree with what you're sharing, and seeing the rise of these micro credentials for upskilling. Have you been seeing a theme? We know AI, a lot is going on in that area, but are you seeing other skill areas that seem to be more elevated now for upskilling?
Yes, yes. Well, on the tech side, I think that we're still in a space of tech AI 101, where I think people are just wanting to understand it and realize that it's more than just, generative AI and chat GPT, right? So I think we see a lot of that. I don't think that will be a forever type of a skill we'll need, but I think more than ever, people are wanting to get as much base knowledge as they can. In terms of the skills where I see the workplace really leaning into is communication. I think where we're seeing a lot of need for either the workforce or for leaders is how do we have conversations? If these are big changes that are coming, how are we going to have these conversations? And so, how do we manage across our teams? How do we talk to each other? How do we talk to our leaders? How do we get them the information they need to help make some decisions? And so, this isn't about giving feedback or learning how to communicate. These are critical skills of being succinct, getting your storytelling, getting your point across. I think storytelling in communication is going to be critical, like, because that's where we hear the human element. And so I think those are skills that have really taken off the last 6 months or so. The other one is more of a technical skill, but I believe it's really going to be helpful for us to plan out where the technology or AI intersects with work. So it's more operational flow, gap analysis, that type of work. So mapping out an activity and seeing where AI could be used, where it might not be used, and then what will be the impact to the overall organization. And I think that we'll start to see some more skill development in that, which will be really helpful. And that's much more of an operational logistics type of skill that, I think you can use AI to help create, but I also think that what we need to understand is as we implement tools, what will be their impact within the broader organization.
Yeah, I like that very much. And I hadn't thought about the aspect of communication. Storytelling has always been something that as occupational therapy practitioners we use sort of as a therapeutic approach. But I hadn't thought about that in the future, that adds sort of the human element to our communication.
Yes. And I think that, the more we can tell stories of the value of human interaction or human skills, the better off we'll be, right? Because what we know is that is not what AI at this point can replace. And so I think people are really leaning into that right now.
I absolutely agree. So, Kathryn, you have been in multiple roles since you graduated from Boston University. What inspires you? What motivates you to take on new challenges, to be innovative? I'm sure our listeners would love to hear that.
There's many. I think at the end of the day, I'm inspired by what the future holds, but by our experiences. And I think through the pandemic, we learned a lot about just humans and we lost a lot of really great people to retirement or whatnot. And they were, people were burnt out. So I'm at the point in my age where I have an interest in making sure that we have a workforce that is committed and loves their work. And I love healthcare. I think it's a wonderful experience to have such an impact on people's individual lives, but it's such a complex system. And so what inspires me is just the work we do with the people we do, but inspiring me to make sure that we have the next generation of leaders and workers that stay innovative, creative, and that we're quickly adapting to these changes and that we don't lose people. We don't lose people because it's once again more change, right? And so I think we just need to make sure that we're helping people constantly adapt to this change. And so that's what it's inspiring me. It's really realizing that I'm at the point in my career that I've had a lot of amazing experiences and mentors. And now for this second act or second half, I really do feel that my role is to lean in to help prepare the next generation to want to do this great work and be excited about it.
Well, I'm so glad that this is what motivates you because we certainly need this. You were mentioning, with COVID, that a lot of the workplace culture has really changed. And maybe you can answer this. Were we or are we still seeing people thinking about retiring maybe earlier than planned, or is that not the case?
I don't have evidence on that. But what I think we're starting to see is people who were thinking about it and not necessarily interested in the reskilling or upskilling that's going to be required for this next, 5 to 10 years. I think more than ever, we're going to start to see people with experience maybe retire and come back because they have the expertise and the experiences that you might not have the other generations. I know for a fact, though, that we did lose a lot of experience and legacy knowledge of healthcare leaders after the pandemic. We're probably in a recovery phase right now, and I would say that more than ever, we really need good leadership. My worry right now is that these are really complex systems level changes happening, and we're coming up against a newer generation of leaders. And so, what does that mean? And what is the impact going to be? And so that's another level of inspiration is, making sure that we are supporting these early leaders to deal with the challenges that are to come.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that wisdom as well. And I just want to thank you on behalf of Work for being on our editorial board. And to our listeners, thank you for listening to Learn at Work. We always welcome hearing from you. Thanks and have a meaningful day.